right, well, good afternoon, all, and thanks for joining us on this May 20th, 2022 edition of Automation Hour. We will go through our usual housekeeping here at first. So, as per usual, all lines are muted. However, we are happy to take all your questions. So you can either post them here in the question widget, or we are also going to be monitoring our Automation Hour Trailblazer community group. This is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel once that recording wraps up. As always, there's lots of resources and places for you to connect with us, so please hit us on the Trailblazer community, visit our website, find us on Twitter, YouTube, and now LinkedIn. Wherever makes the most sense for you, we love to connect and chat with all y'all. So up next, we have the rest of the lineup for the first half of the year. So we actually moved Michael up a week due to the upcoming holiday. So we have Ashley and Josh to round out June, and we are currently taking submissions for the second half of the year and hope to have that posted here in the next couple of weeks. So if you have been a fan of the broadcast and have something that you'd like to share with the community, we invite you to come and present with us. And we'll put that link in the chat as we go along. As always, we cannot bring this to you without the support of our sponsors. So we first want to say thank you to Concrete.io, who has been with us since the beginning, about 6 years now. Without their support, this would not be happening, as well as our new sponsor that we have, and that is Salto. If you have not checked either one of these out, we definitely recommend that you do so. And again, appreciate their support allowing us to bring this to you. So after that, we always think it's great to take just a minute to look back at our roots. So Michael, if you want to hit the next slide here.
I do not see it. Your co-founders?
Uh-oh, looks like we've got a screen shared glitch. I'm still on the Salto slide. Maybe that's just me.
Let me try again. It's the audience view. Yeah, it must be just you, because the audience view shows the co-founders.
Phenomenal. Well, we'll do this blind. That's great. So obviously, we got to say mad thanks to our co-founders, Jen, Rakesh, and David, for bringing this into being. And of course, we know as time goes on, things change. So we've made some changes to the co-hosts. And so Rakesh and I are now happy to be the current co-hosts. So with that, Michael, if I remember our slide deck right, next up ought to be you and your bio slide. So we will turn it over to you.
Okay, sounds good. Just let me know if there's any trouble seeing the screen. If you'll let me know in chat. It does say audience view 97%. Now it says 100%. Okay, so this is me. If you hopefully can see my bio here with NBC Sports Next since 2013. Started out my career as electrical engineer. Moved on to small business administration and landed somehow in sales, this world of Salesforce. It was one of those things where somebody said, hey, we need somebody to help manage our CRM. And I was the most technical person on the team and said, sure, I'll take a look at that. And I fell in love with Salesforce. It's been a great ride. My first career before NBC Sports Next, where I came into contact with Salesforce. And I've been to Dreamforce starting in 2011, started speaking at Dreamforce back in 2014. I've been on Automation Hour here since 2018. So really enjoy the ecosystem. I've learned so much from the community. I'm here trying to just give back a little bit of what I can. In the meantime, I've been certified 3 times, working on my Salesforce developer certification right now. So I'm working actually on the super badge for Apex right now. About a third of the way through it. Got my Ranger badge. Highly recommend Trailhead if you haven't got in there. There's a lot of resources. It's a great way to learn something that 10, 12 years ago I did not have access to, and but since it's come out, it's been super helpful. A little more about the company I work for, NBC Sports Next. We are all the technology businesses under the NBC Sports umbrella, effectively. So anything that's not television production and distribution, that's what we are. We're all the next generation of technology and businesses that NBC is getting into. Golf Now being the major product. We sell tee times online. So if you play golf, go check out golfnow.com. Golf Pass is a product that allows you to book without paying any transaction fees on GolfNow, and gives you a bunch of other benefits and features as well. So it's one of our flagship products that's coming along. And GolfNow Compete's just another example of one of the products that's kind of also underneath GolfNow. But also part of, besides the golf business, which is why I focus on the golf business, part of NBC Sports Next also includes Sports Engine, which is a youth sports and recreation, along with the Sports Edge and Sports Predictor, which are part of our betting and gaming businesses. So that's where NBC Sports is headed next. Click down here. All right. So today I'm here to talk to you about email automation. So if you've used Salesforce for any period of time, you probably have wanted to send an email. Sometimes some orgs, we send way too many email. That's one thing I tried actually. First thing I say is, are you sure you want an email for this? Is this something somebody's looking at every day? And I'd start off by saying, don't create an email alert if you don't need one, because people get buried in email, and emails to me it gets overused sometimes. There's actually other ways to handle alerts. In fact, I should have made this email alert if you have to. Otherwise, there's other ways like Chatter. You can actually automate Chatter, and there's other things you can do. But I'll get into that if there's some time at the end, because there are some ways you can automate Chatter, which is really slick and helpful. And I do quite a bit of that as well. But we do still do a lot of email alerts. I have a lot of team members. They want email. They want to know when things happen in Salesforce through automation. They want an alert when things happen certain times. And and we also have a nice thing about email alerts, unlike Chatter, is we can send things out to our customers automatically. So that's the use case I'm going to show to you today. So we're going to talk a little about legacy email alerts. You have those that you can send via workflow rules. The legacy email alerts can also be sent from Flow directly, that's where you should be sending any email alerts, of course, from record triggered flows. Now workflow rules are kind of a dying breed from that legacy classic stuff. So we're trying to get away from that over time, it seems. I know we definitely do that in our org, not creating any new workflow rules. Everything's a record triggered flow now. But one of the limitations, even sending email alerts, whether it's from a legacy workflow rule or a flow, if you're using the email alert feature, is you're limited to make them dynamic. You can make them somewhat dynamic. You can have related user fields, contact fields on your record that can then be pulled in. So in that way, it's dynamic. But and you can have like an account team. So you can say, well, yeah, I want to, for example, so if as long as your object has a master detail relationship to the account, or it's from the account directly, you can reference your account team and send email alerts to those users that are they're part of the account team, for example. And you can send to a larger recipient list. I haven't really hit the limit on this. I'm not actually sure what it is. There probably is a limit to how many recipients can be on a legacy email alert, but it must be pretty high because I haven't hit it yet. Which is contrary to the email action that's in Flow that I'm going to talk about. That's what I'm going to share with you today. You can send to a dynamic recipient list, which I'm going to show you how I do that with using Flow. But one of the challenges with it is it's limited to 5 recipients per email, which I found kind of surprising when I first tried to use this. I immediately came across some issues where it said, no, this flow is going to fail if you're trying to send to more than 5 recipients. So I found some ways to work around that, which is what I'm going to share with you in the Flow example on the next screen. So the example flow is going to show you how, if you want to send to dynamic recipient lists, for example, some recipients could be based on direct relationships like the account team, but they may not. Let's say it's not a master detail relationship to the account. If you have a legacy email alert and you don't have a direct master detail relationship to that account, let's say it's a couple layers out and it's a lookup relationship at some level to the account team, you won't be able to dynamically pull that account team into your legacy email alert unless you move records, do some real gymnastics to make it work. It's not going to work just out of more or less out of the box. It's going to be something you'd have to do some extra effort for. And and it could be also, the other use case I have is you have recipients that are on a related record. So you have a list of related contacts. And that's the example I'm going to show you is that we're connecting a bunch of contacts to a record dynamically. We're saying, hey, these are contacts that are now tied to this object because we want to, it could be one or many contacts that we want, and we want to send an alert to all the contacts that are on this list. and not have to worry about creating individual lookup relationship fields, which again, you could do that. You could create lookup relationship fields, a whole bunch of them. Of course, there is a limit on how many lookup relationship fields you can have, which I've hit that limit in some objects. So you want to be careful. You don't want to, it's not a great practice to have, especially when it's variable, how many of these contacts might be related, to have, a bunch of different lookup relationship fields. It gets a little messy. So that what I'm going to show you is how we can loop through all the contacts that are related and loop and also go look up other users, for example, that are tied into the record in the org, and add them all to a single list of recipients. Now, mentioned the problem is, we get more than 5 and it's going to break the send. Well, so what we want to do is dedupe the list. I'll show you how we're going to do that. And also, we're going to break it up to send separate sends per group of 5 recipients. So that's what I'm going to share with you next. So this is the flow that I am sharing, that I'm going to be describing to you today. Hopefully you see this flow on my screen. It is, it says it's audience view 98%. I'm not sure if that means it's not getting to everybody yet. But I'll describe briefly how the flow works. Then I'm going to pull up actually the live flow in my sandbox and click through and show you kind of how I put it together. But I'll go ahead and describe the flow, this particular use case, and what I have done to make this thing work. So in this use case, I have, let me just go right to that other tab. I'm going to go ahead and stop presenting. How do I end slideshow? Let's do that. And let's click on here. So this is the flow that I was just showing you a screenshot of, and it starts. This is an auto launch flow, so I'm not using record triggered flow in this case because I'm actually having the users push a button to send this email. I don't want. I could have it happen dynamically through other means, but you can also tie it to a tab in Lightning, or you can create a button. There's a bunch of different ways for an auto launch flow, or you can actually call this from a record triggered flow as a sub flow. That's something that's now available, I think, as in the spring release. You can call sub flows from a record triggered flow. So the first step I'm doing is I'm looking up a related user. So, or actually, I'm looking up the activation details. This is we call it our activations. We're implementing Golf Now for our customers, right? So we put an activation record in that is where we collect a lot of information about that we need from the customer to complete activations. That's what that's all about. And we're just grabbing, and what I do is I'm passing the ID into the flow. And then so the first step I do is look up the record that I just triggered the flow with. If it was a record triggered flow, if this element was a record triggered flow, I wouldn't have to do this because it would have the record in a $ record variable automatically, which is really nice about record triggered flows. But I have to get the record at some point. So here's where I pull it in. And now it's in a record variable through this lookup. The next step is, and this is on my onboarding contacts. So in onboarding for us, these are the contacts that need to be involved with getting us set up. And we want the onboarding contacts, or the external customer contacts who we want to receive this alert. So I created this object called contact on activation. So when they have their activation record, they're going to add, in a related list, they're going to add all the contacts, one or many, that are going to be tied to this contact. We do, and we have requirements on the front end that they have to give us at least one contact. That's going to be their onboarding contact, but they can give us many onboarding contacts. It could be this whole group that wants to be involved with the onboarding. So I don't know what that's going to be. It's varies client to client. So that's why I'm going to look up all records that are in this related object. That's the very first step. So again, I'm just using the out-of-the-box storage for the records. This is, again, nice thing about more modern flows of the last couple of years. You can very easily store everything in a record or a multi-record collection without having to jump through a lot of hoops, without defining which fields you're pulling. It just automatically stores fields. It's really, really great. So that's been around for a little while. So we also want to get a couple internal users involved here. So we have a owner of the account. So I'm looking up through the activation, which is has a lookup relationship and opportunity, which then ties to the account. So because of this depth of relationship, I wouldn't be able to do a standard email alert and potentially find this person without writing that contact back to to an opportunity record, the user rather, the account owner. So because I am able to use Flow to look this up, I don't have to worry about that level of relationship, which again, with standard email alert, that may be a little tricky. But I'm of course making sure that that current owner is active in case somebody hasn't changed the owner, somebody has left. So I'm just making sure we're not sending emails to people who are gone. And again, using this automatic storage here to keep it simple. And then the last lookup that I'm doing is my account team. So I mentioned this again, that if you have an account team if I was running this off the opportunity, no problem. The opportunity has a master detail relationship to the account. So therefore, if I was sending a standard alert, I could just reference the account team directly. However, because I'm on this child activation record, which has a lookup relationship to an opportunity, doesn't have a master detail relationship, but there's a lot of reasons why I didn't set that up. I initially had a master detail relationship. I had to undo it because of some ownership issues. We wanted to have activations have their own ownership, and that was the main reason, and their own approvals and things that wouldn't really work well being a master detail relationship. So I ended up keeping this as a lookup relationship, but therefore I can't pull the account team dynamically in a standard email alert. Without, again, jumping through some hoops, pulling, dynamically, writing record, writing new fields on record. I'd rather keep the information where it belongs and not have to keep writing information all over my org if I can avoid it. Sometimes you can't, but this case I can because I'm using this tool. So again, I'm pulling a specific team member role. Now there could be more than one. That's the other thing. So I am pulling all records because some of our areas have multiple area sales managers, and we want to copy everybody that's in that particular role. Now, one of the challenges, you'll notice I've got, especially with this lookup. Now, onboarding contacts, we hope people aren't putting duplicate users in with the same email address, but they could. There's nothing to prevent that right now. When they're adding their onboarding contacts, they end up adding two people that share an email address. The same email address will be in the list twice potentially. And it could be the account owner is one of the area sales managers right now. For some reason, they're taking ownership of an account temporarily, and so therefore they'll end up getting pulled in twice. That's one of the challenges with these lookups. But the next step, though, I'm gonna go check now for each one of these three primary lookups. I'm now going to do a decision, and I highly recommend this anytime you're doing flow is and you're doing a lookup and then you want to do an action or loop through records based on that lookup. You can't guarantee. I mean, maybe you feel pretty confident, but I can't guarantee that I'm going to find any onboarding contacts. I should always find an account owner, but maybe something gets goofed up or the account owner is not active. I had a filter on there to not active, and maybe no ASMs are assigned. So if any one of these lookups doesn't return a record, I don't want to try to loop through them or do an assignment and find out, have the flow fail. You will end up with flow failures if you try to loop through a list of records and there's no records in the list you're trying to loop through. It won't just say, oh, there's no records, I'll just keep going. The flow will actually spin up a failure, and you'll get these nasty messages on your screen potentially, or it just won't do anything, right, if it's automated in the back end. So you'll get an email alert that says, hey, this didn't work. So what I do is I always do a decision to say, did I get anything in here? So this is the this is again a highly recommended check, is to look at the lookup output, which is just that. In this case, it's just the record collection variable of the onboarding contacts I looked up. So I'm getting contact activation. That's what this whole thing is. That's the API name for that record collection variable that I just pulled that was automatically created. And I'm just checking to see if it's null or not. Simple as that. If it's null, then I'll skip this. I'll default out, come right out, and go look at the account owner. That means they didn't add any. Although I think I have some front end things requiring them to have an onboarding contact, just in case something went weird, and I don't want this process to fail. So if I do find them, then I'm going to loop through my contacts. I just add a loop to go through every record in this collection. For each one, I'm going to look at and make sure the email is set on that contact. So if the email is null, is false, meaning there is an email address set on that contact, then I'll continue and I'll add them to the collection. So the adding to collection is very easy. I create in this case, I've created a collection variable that, if you're not familiar with how to create variables, it's new resource variable, and you name it whatever you want. I always put underscore VAR just so I can recognize my variables versus other types of elements, data types, because I use so many variables. But you can create, again, a record variable, and to have it be a multi-record, just check this box, allow multiple values. And then you identify the object that variable's in. So that's all you do there to set up a new variable. And then you're just going to add, again, the record that's in the loop. So I'm looking at my loop, and I'm adding, this case, I'm just adding the email address to this collection of email. And so this case, it wasn't a record collection. It was actually a text collection. And I'm just putting my email addresses in one at a time to a collection. So it's going to add them to a big list. If you're familiar with Apex, it's just like a list in Apex. In this case, a list that's a string type list. So it has all the email addresses in it as a string. So once I'm done looping through all the onboarding contacts and adding them to my collection, so I add, basically populating them into the list, then I'm checking the account owner to see if that account owner has been identified. So if the account owner is null, is false, meaning there is an account owner set, then I'm going to just add that to the collection. That one's pretty easy because it's only a single record expecting to be, or a single email address expected to be returned. And again, I'm just adding the email address that's related to that particular owner. And then same similar to for the ASM, in this case, the Art Area Sales Managers, I'm going to then loop all the ASMs. Doesn't matter for me which order I loop them in, so I keep it default first to last. And for each one, I'm adding their email address. Now, I didn't check to see if they have an email address because they're a user in Salesforce. Users in Salesforce have to have an email address. There's no way to create one without it, so I'm not too worried about running into that potential error. So I'm just adding each email address I find related to that ASM that was on the account team, look at the user record, grab their email address. So again, that's nice thing you drill right in down to the level you need. You don't have to assign that anywhere upstream because of Salesforce feature of adding pretty much everything into the record that you need when you do the lookups, the dynamic lookups, and use their out-of-the-box features, which I've never hit any limits on that as far as, I have some pretty big objects with lots of fields. Never had any problem with those on any of even the large objects. Okay, so now we've got to this point, the contacts, the decision about contacts in the collection. So it could be that somehow, some way, none of these return any records. So therefore, I hit the default outcome, the no. I get to here. If I happen to follow that path by some strange coincidence, then I will get to this decision and I will end up having email addresses is null is false. Well, it will be true. There'll be nothing in there. It'll have never hit anything where I add to a collection. Therefore, my collection is empty. Again, always a good idea before you try to act on a collection of records. Make sure you have something in your collection. Maybe try to update or create, or in this case, I'm going to do a sort and do some other actions further on. It's always a great idea to check to make sure you have something in there before you try to do any actions on it. So very similar to how I did my checks for each of these decisions earlier. So again, checking to make sure there's something in there. And then I'm using this somewhat newer feature, which we can now do a sort on our collection. So and you can actually say, I only want the first so many items. I could say, I want to keep the first 5. That'd be a solution, right? I could say, just drop every other email address. Well, I don't want to do that here because I want all the emails to get something. But I want them sorted because I'm not sure which order they're going to really get added in. And if there are duplicate email addresses, I want them to show up right next to each other. And I'll show you why here on the next element. So collection sort, super handy, especially if you're going to dedupe records. One of the things that you will run into, especially if you're trying to do any kind of record updates or creates, but really actually creates not a problem, but updates. You try to update the same record twice in the same collection, you will get a flow failure. So doing a collection sort and then deduping is a super helpful, little mnemonic here. I don't know what I want to call it, but it's helpful. Just little piece of code, you could say, that I use quite frequently in many of my flows where I'm pulling a bunch of records in, maybe from different sources or different ways. I'm querying to get records one way, then I do another lookup to get records another way because I can't really get the logic right in one lookup, and then I put everything into one giant collection. Well, if I get the same record in twice, it tries to do the update on the same record twice, it will fail. In this case, I don't want to send the same email to the same email address more than once. That's where I'm going to do my remove. That's where my remove duplicates come in. There's no out of the box feature for this. But there is a way to do it using the sort and then using the loop. So I'm going to loop through everything in this collection. Again, I'm just going to say, hey, everything in that email addresses collection that I now have a list of email addresses, they're now ordered in alphabetical order. The next check that I'm going to do is say, hey, Did the prior email, which I haven't set yet because I'm on the first record, but you'll see later where I set this. If the prior, so it's null, of course, it won't match anything. If it matches the record, the email address in my duplicate, then I'm going to take it out. So it's just checking to see if, is this right? Duplicates. Yeah, it's current item because this is just a list of texts. That's why. So it's the first line of text, which is an email address. It's comparing to my prior email variable, which is just a text variable, and saying, do these things match? If they match, that's where I'm going to hit the yes. So yes, they do match. I'm going to skip that item, and I'm not going to add it to my collection because that means I've already added that email address later. So what I'm doing is if I say no, if I say no, it's not a match, then I add to my send collection. So I say email send variable, which is the different text variable than my original one, the original collection. I'm going to add the one from my loop, so the remove duplicates loop. So and then I'm adding to my count. I'm adding one to make sure that I know that I've done this. So, and let's see, did I not set? I may have missed a step here because I'm checking against prior email, but I bet you I forgot to do that. This is not good. So I'm going to set what I forgot to do, and I realized is prior email. And this is still something in Sandbox, so I need to make sure this is on my loop current item. I need to set that here. This is a big miss here. So that's important, and I totally missed that part. So the prior email has to be set at this point to the one I just checked. So when I get to this point, I'm adding it to the collection so that I can then send. Well, the way I've worked this out is when I come back through, now I come back through the loop, let's say I've come through a few times, I check to see if it matches. Of course, I don't do anything. The next thing I check, because this, by the way, if you haven't seen this before in a decision, each of these decisions, it only runs, it checks each decision in the order in which you see them. So that's why you can drag these, make them different order if you want. Of course, I want to check to see if first it's a duplicate. The next thing I check, if it's not a duplicate, is, and so these things don't have to be all set up mutually exclusive. You just have to make sure that if you don't meet this criteria can be less stringent. And then of course the final criteria is there's no criteria. If you got to this point, you didn't meet any of these other criteria. So in this case, I'm checking to see if the count equals 5. And if you'll notice that when I've come through and I add things to the collection, I come through and say, okay, well, I keep adding to this count variable to see if and it should increment. So if I've come through 5 times and there's still another email address. Now, if there's no more email addresses at any point before I hit 5, or even once I hit 5, if there's no more email addresses in the loop, I'll exit the loop and I'll just send the email to the 5 people, up to exactly 5 people. However, if at this point there's another email address, I'm going to come down to this point, say, well, it's not a duplicate, but but the count has already been added up to 5. When you got to this, last time you looped through here, you added up to 5. So I can't add that new email address to the collection. I can't add the 6th email address. That's why I don't get to the no at this point, because I don't want to go over 5. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and send the onboarding email. Now, again, there might be a limit of how many times you can send an email inside of a loop. So you do have to keep that in mind. I don't expect to have that many contacts. I expect the onboarding contacts to remain somewhat light. But I do expect occasionally to have 6, 7 emails. So I'm designing for that kind of scale. If I was going to send hundreds, it's possible that I might hit some kind of Salesforce limit trying to loop and send all these emails. The other thing, while I'm waiting for this thing to open, the other thing that's kind of a downside of this design is the send onboarding email is only going to go to those 5 email addresses. The other email addresses that are now still pending that are going to get sent later are going to be on a separate send. Therefore, if a recipient is looking at the other recipients to see who else got this, they may or may not see everybody else who got the email. So that's one of the risks or downsides of using this solution. But it's the trade-off for being able to create this dynamic list. So you got to look at it that way. But you can see this is the send email. This is what it looks like. This is not send using the email alert function because, again, I can't send to a dynamic list. But here I can. I can send to that email send collection, as you can see here. And you can also create a comma separated list if you want to do that. It's just a different way of adding email addresses. I've done that as well before, where I just created a formula of some kind and did comma separated email addresses. But for this use case, the collection worked. It was the easiest way to do it without having to create variables or formulas and anything weird to deal with the commas. So don't have to deal with commas in this one. And I'm using rich text formatted text. That's something I also wanted to show you, which I'll get into a minute in the back end of the emailer. But that's my email body and subject. But for hint, email subject is not HTML. You notice there's no email rich text formatted subject. So you got to make sure your subject is flat plain text, which I'll show you that in a minute. Whereas your body, if you don't set this value to true, will and you make your body rich text, it's going to send with all the code, with all the HTML codes. It's not actually going to format it. It's not going to send an HTML email, which make it look a little ugly. So again, always a good idea to test after you create this to see, oh man, did I forget to set that to true, or did I forget to set this correctly? Which I'll show you those here momentarily. Okay, so back to the count. So my count's 5. I'm going to click send onboarding email. It's going to shoot to those 5 recipients, right? It's going to go to those first 5. Well, then now I basically need to clear the slate. I need to set my count back to 0 because I don't have any emails in my count. I still have one. I'm still in the loop, so I still have an email that's the next email in the loop that I'm going to have to deal with, which I'll deal with in a moment. But I have to clear my collection, so I set my send variable to null. So I'm basically just wiping it out. I'm saying make sure this variable has nothing in it, so it basically wipes out the list. And go back to my email. I go ahead and populate email send again. I'm going to add the email address that we just looped through. And I'm also going to set that prior email, which I'd forgotten to do earlier, otherwise it wouldn't actually dedupe. And we're going to increase our count from 0 back to 1. So I'm basically starting over. So this way I don't have to worry about if this happened to have 100 emails in it. Every 5, it's going to keep on going through until it gets to the point where I don't have a 6th email to add to this collection, or there's fewer. Obviously, it's 1 to 5 are here, and I have nothing else to go through. Then it's going to go back here and confirm, hey, we still have something to send. Again, when I exit the loop, ways this designed, I shouldn't really have to do this decision. It's just, again, part of my habits to always check to make sure there's something in there to go out. In this case, I'm just making sure there's at least one item in the collection, and I'm gonna go ahead and do this final send of that onboarding email. Same thing you saw before. All the settings are exactly the same. As far as Salesforce is concerned, just whatever's in that collection at the time is gonna get that particular email. All right, so the couple things also I wanted to show you specifically around email templates. One of the I guess maybe, well, let me first show you the body. Let me show you the email subject. So again, subject, this right here is very important. I forget it all the time, and then I test and I realize, oh yeah, I forgot to do that. This by default will be rich text. You'll start typing, it'll look like plain text as far as you're concerned. You'll say done, you'll move on with your life. You'll then send your email, and your subject will have all these tags in it. This P, inside of the brackets on one side, and then another set of brackets at /P, to show the paragraph designation. It always puts some tags in there automatically with the rich text. And then if you add it, of course, if you actually do rich text and make it bold, because when you're on the rich text editor, you get the WYSIWYG, and it can get a little crazy. So the best bet for subject, make sure it's always plain text, because otherwise the subject will come out goofy. Subject's always plain text. The email body now can be plain text. You could just say, show me, do plain text. Of course, if I don't say that's true, this is what the user is going to get. They're going to see all these tags that you see here. I don't want them to see these tags. Now, you could also use like an external HTML editor, make your email body look really great. You don't have to use the WYSIWYG editor to build it. You can do it something offline, but there's no other HTML editor in here other than the little WYSIWYG rich text editor. But you can drop all your HTML in here, and then you just go back to rich text, and you should see, all your HTML should then render. So it's a good way to just, flip back and forth for editing if you're trying to do some more complex HTML. In this case, I just dragged and dropped, used the WYSIWYG editor, grabbed a Golf Now image in here, which actually I need to update because that's just, our logo just changed for Golf Now, just this week, I think. And we have a link, a dynamic link out to an onboarding application. This is somebody that's using our payments product. That's the onboarding in this case that we're doing. So I created this email that's just going to go to those contacts that are listed as our onboarding contact. It's a pretty basic email. There's not a lot to it, but we could make it more complex if we needed to. Again, it's making sure you're using rich text, not rich text. Make sure it's in your onboarding email. That's super important, just to make sure it's going to look right on the output. And of course, you should always test. If you're testing in a sandbox, make sure you turn on email delivery, because emails won't go out unless you turn email delivery on in sandboxes. Of course, if you're doing this in production, you'll be able to test right away, but of course, it's production. So highly recommend you test in sandbox. Only turn email delivery on while you're testing, and then turn it back. At least our process is to turn it on for testing, make sure everybody knows it's on, so no one does any testing that might send a bunch of alerts inadvertently to clients from a sandbox environment, which that just happened with a big company. I can't remember who did it, but an intern sent a bunch of emails from a dev environment, which was not intended. And it can happen, so you gotta be careful. All right. But as you see, everything else in here is pretty straightforward as far as the collection variables I showed you earlier. The email address are just text variables. Data type text, allow multiple to add to the collection. You can create all your variables, resources here. The single record variables, of course, are all created for the most part, all created from my lookups, and as my collection variables are as well. So that those are for record collections. Those are all dynamically done by Salesforce for me, so I don't have to create those variables, which is so nice with this version. The later versions of Flow that we have now. You see the other variables I have in here, and I think that's about it. Everything else is just pointing to elements that are on the screen that we've reviewed already. So
is this a good time to stop for questions?
Yeah, this is probably a great time to, if there are any questions about what I've done, how I did it, this is, I find to be a pretty handy, for me, a use case, and I'm using it in some other places in my org as well.